like, so there's obviously a white pill to be taken away from the article that you can see on screen. Clearly, suicides in Scotland have dropped by 11%. Figures have gone on to show, where it says here that according to statistics released by the National Records of Scotland, the figure in 2024, or for 2024, sorry, fell to the lowest level since 2017, with 704 recorded, which is 86 fewer than the previous year. Those in the most deprived areas, however, of Scotland were 2.5 times more likely to take their own lives, with a rate of 7.4%. I keep doing that. It's 7.4 per 100,000 in the least deprived areas, compared with 18.7 in the poorest areas. This is the bit that annoys me about this article, and it's not the only article. Every single fucking article seems to have their own take on this, but they still feel the need to add in bullshit like this, such as the Rainbow Unicorn government, aka the Scottish government, said that although the drop was encouraging, it would not be complacent. And again, this goes back to something I have said for years, and it's something I will continue to stress, and that is that the Scottish government are not responsible for drug deaths, suicides, and alcohol deaths. They're also, by extension, not responsible, nor can they be credited for any decline in drug deaths, suicides, and or alcohol deaths, right? But it's remarkable to me that these people can fucking say these things, you know, as if they can pat themselves in the back when the statistics suit them, but when things don't go their way, well, you know, more needs to be done, if it's no Westminster's fault, it's because we need to, more needs to be done, Stop pretending, stop LARPing as if you've got any fucking involvement in statistics going forward. However, on that point, just to further prove my point before I go any further, right? Alcohol deaths. Let's talk about alcohol deaths. This is from last year, right? So there was the second rounds of increasing the amount, or the minimum unit pricing, basically an alcohol tax in Scotland, right? So it says here, this is from 30th of September 2024. The minimum price at which alcohol can be sold in Scotland has risen by 30% in an attempt to keep up with inflation. I blame that. Anyway, the minimum unit price has not changed since it was set at 50p per unit of alcohol when it was first introduced in May 2018. Fun little fact for you, by the way, right? So when they came round to them, and again, increasing the price, it was recommended by the so-called experts to just increase it by an additional 50p or 50%, sorry, right? What did the Scottish government do? No, that's no high enough. Let's make it 65, right? Henceforth, it says here that it has now been increased to 65p per unit, right? However, this isn't, I mean, it is annoying, but it's not my point of contention here. Scotland was the first country in the world to set a minimum price at which alcoholic drinks could be sold when the policy was introduced in May 2018. They claimed back in the day, and they've continued to claim, that this was going to save lives. They claim it has saved lives. Estimations and experts have said that it's going to save lives. Has it saved lives? No. We'll come on to that in just a second. Point being, though, right? The policy was mainly aimed at strong, cheap alcohol sold in shops and supermarkets, right? Then it says, though, after the legislation was introduced, a Public Health Scotland study published in June last year found that minimum unit pricing schemes had helped to reduce alcohol-related health inequalities. However, the number of people in Scotland whose death was caused by alcohol remains at a high level. So much so, bear in mind this was 2024, right? Right? Scottish alcohol deaths at 15-year high. Again, let me stress the point here that the Scottish government are not responsible for people dying due to alcoholism and or suicide and or drug overdoses. However, the Scottish Government are the very people who insinuate that their policies, their practice, and their rhetoric will save the fucking day. The things that they intend to do going forward, their justification for their taxation in some instances, are going to solve issues. Right? They put themselves into the firing line for flack and criticism, etc. The reality of the matter is, they've got fuck all to do with any increase in any statistics. The same principle is applicable, however, for when statistics don't go their way, right? Henceforth, the suicidality, which I was speaking about just previously, and I will come back onto that in just a second. However, Scottish alcohol deaths at a 50-new high, the same year that they proclaimed that increasing the alcohol tax was going to stop or save lives. It's going to stop alcohol deaths and it's going to save lives. Aye, good one, you fucking assholes. So then we come to the suicide statistics for the last year. Published on the 16th of September. The main points. In 2024, there were 704 probable suicide related deaths, a decrease of 86, which is 11%, from 790 in 2023. Compared to 2023, male probable suicide deaths decreased by 71, 12%, to 518 deaths in 2024, while female probable suicide deaths decreased by 15%. The rate of probable suicide mortality in males was nearly 3 times higher than that of females. Rates have been consistently higher for males since the series began, ranging from 2.6 to 3.6 times as higher compared to females. The rate of probable suicide mortality in the most deprived areas in Scotland was 2.5 times as high as the least deprived areas in Scotland. The gap between rates of probable suicide mortality between the most and the least deprived areas has decreased since 2001, driven by lower rates in the most deprived areas. In 2024, age-specific rates of probable suicide mortality were highest for those aged between 25 and 64. Since 2000, the average age at death for probable suicides has generally increased from 41, well, let's just say, for argument's sake, 42 years in 2000 to 47, or whatever, 47, 48 years in 2024. This is slightly younger than in 2022, which represented the oldest average age at death. How are probable suicides defined? Coding for cause of death in Scotland carried out according to the World Health Organization framework. Deaths with an underlying cause of one of the following categories are counted as probable suicide: intentional self-harm, events of undetermined intent, intentional self-harm, or events, regardless, right? I'm not getting tongue-tied in that shite. Point being, though, of course, there's a white pill to be taken from that in the last year there's been a reduction, statistically speaking, in the amount of people who have taken their own lives. However, it's still a very fucking common practice, right? And I think questions need to be asked. A lot needs to be addressed as to why this continues to be the case. I will not fucking sit here and allow the Scottish Government to take any credit for a slight reduction. I think more needs to be discussed on the matter. You know, it seems to be a very taboo subject, to be honest, right? Just on a brief side note, right? It was only a few years ago that my fucking auntie committed suicide, you know? My auntie committed suicide. And a few years ago, I was in the sort of metaphorical pits of despair myself, right? I know people, past and present, who have taken their own life. It's something that seems to kind of go under the radar, for lack of better terminology. And that's not the responsibility of the council, nor is it the responsibility of the government. But rest assured, these are issues that are seriously exacerbating the stresses of society. And I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. A slight reduction does not mean that this time next year there will be a continual decline. You know, I think a lot of funding needs to be placed into mental health services for people that feel under the weather and whatnot, as opposed to fucking funneling it into nonsense such as carbon capture and all things sustainability. Time will tell, eh? But irrespective, you know, it is, of course, there is a white pill to be extrapolated from this. That suicidality, for the time being, is on the decrease. But fucking do not fall into the web in relation to believing that the S&P have got any fucking responsibility for that. Anyway, adios.